Hi Fiona, thank you so much firstly for joining us today in our first ever podcast of our podcast series, and I'm so glad that we were able to make it, although we were planning to have this podcast from last year, but unfortunately we were not able to do so. But I'm so happy today that we are together and you took time to make this happen, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Actually, I feel honored to be the first guest on your podcast, and I'm looking forward to the next ones as well.
Thank you so much. So I worked with you very closely. You were my CEO and mentor previously, so I know you very well. For our audience information, if you can let us know about your journey and how it has been so far, and some of the glimpses of your journey so far.
Sure. So thank you for that introduction, and I'll try to keep it brief so you can ask questions of what you want to know more about. I started as I introduced myself today. I introduced myself as a serial entrepreneur, but I didn't start like that. I started as not wanting to go to university because I'd rather just have a job. But then I ended up going to study first computer science, then bioinformatics, and then from bioinformatics I went first from studying bioinformatics in Denmark to studying bioinformatics in the Netherlands. And then when I was in the Netherlands and I was doing my PhD at that point, I got disillusioned by the impact you can make by doing a PhD, because you're focusing your science on such a small tiny bit of the world that it's difficult to see the impact this tiny bit of research has on the outside world. So I was missing the impact bit of the work I was doing. So I left my PhD to move to Cambridge, UK, to work for Illumina, which is a company that makes next generation sequencing instruments for DNA sequencing, and worked there as a bioinformatics scientist. So still at this point I had no idea or ambition of becoming an entrepreneur or running a business. But during my work, both in the academic work and the work I did at Illumina, I realized that there was a big blocker for research progress, in that researchers weren't sharing data freely between each other. It was very difficult to share data, very difficult to find access to data, lots of complications and hurdles about data protection, clinical data, privacy, anonymization of data and data access, all of this. And I thought it must be possible to make this easier, because if we make data sharing easier for research, then all research will take a big step forward. So I left my job at Illumina as a bioinformatics scientist to start a charity, because back at that time I thought the biggest impact I can have on this particular problem I want to solve is as a charity, because as a charity everybody will recognize the mission that I'm on, and then everybody will be able to contribute to that mission. So in that sense, that worked well. So I founded the charity DNA Digest in 2013. Unfortunately, what I didn't know back then, but what I since learned, is that if you want to make a big impact, it's not enough that people understand what is the mission you're out to achieve, but you also need to find a mechanism that you can make a business model work for that mission. So after a year and a half of running the charity, we did hackathons, meeting, presentations, brought a lot of people together with the common interest on making progress in this field. I still didn't have any funding for the charity to do the work that we wanted to do. And I had an ambition of building a technological platform to make it easier for researchers to share data. So what I learned over that year and a half was that to make the impact that I wanted to make and building a technology platform, I would need to have some funding to actually build a technical platform, because you can't do that for free. People cost money, time costs money, and so on. And to do that as a charity, you can't get that as donations. People don't donate to create a technical platform for research, right? That's not what people donate money to. We couldn't get any grant funding, because as a charity you're not a business, so you can't get business funding, and we were not a research institution, so we couldn't get research funding. So the solution was to create the impact and the platform that I wanted to make as a company instead of a charity. So out of this charity we spun out a company so this was early 2014, we took our first investment. This is the company that eventually became Repositive. So we created a company that had the same mission as the charity, to make it easier for researchers to share data for the benefit of patients. But it was incorporated as a limited company, so a commercial company. We created a business model and went out to raise funding from investors. So first funding round was, I believe, was it January 2015? It must have been, with angel investors, and I built this company together with my co-founder Adrian, who I found because he was also working at Illumina before that, so we used to work together at Illumina. So he joined as co-founder, and then at Repositive, I was the CEO from the beginning, and we first created a platform for data sharing for research, and then we had to pivot our business model and market focus to find out how could we make that work commercially. So from a generic platform for sharing data, we pivoted into cancer research, and from generic data for cancer research, we pivoted into the specifically preclinical cancer models that biopharma use to test drugs for cancer treatment. And within that niche, we then found our market, we found biopharma partners, we found preclinical CROs who partnered with us to make available the cancer models. And I ran this business for 7 years, so from 2013 to 2020. The company unfortunately did not survive the pandemic onset, when all the biopharma partners, they froze their budgets and didn't spend any money for almost a year.
And during those 7 years, only you and Adrian were two people who were running this company.
Oh no! We grew the company. We hired team members. When the company was the biggest, we were 40 people.
Okay.
Yeah. We then had after that a cutback, so we went back into 12, 16 people. And then in the last year of the company, we were more like 5 or 6 people, because we tried to make it work, although the market conditions were bad. But in the end, it didn't work out. So it was a sad story for the company. We put a lot of effort into it. You know, when you've developed it all from scratch and then it in the end doesn't survive, you get a feeling of sadness that it didn't get out there in the world. But we achieved a lot of impact in the time that we existed. So all the people who worked for us and all the customers that we served got a lot of value from working with us. So in that sense, we did have some impact, but not as much impact that I'd like to see.
Correct. And I also feel that it's also about the time as well. I think putting right thing at the right time also works. I was at the Cambridge Tech Week a few weeks back. Then I saw a lot of companies are doing something similar which you had done 7 years ago, but that is mostly in the blockchain way. And they are getting a lot of attraction and investment. So sometimes it's also that the idea is great, the concept is great, but people are not very they haven't heard of this idea. And maybe because they are not aware, they don't really know that is it a must-have thing or is it good to have thing, or what to do with this.
Sometimes it's just a question of the right timing with the market. You know, when a market is ready for something, then anything that looks useful, you get the customers are crowding around it. But if you're offering the same thing but at a different time, when maybe too early so that people haven't realized they have this problem yet, or at a point where they're focused on other things because other things take importance. For example, at the onset of the pandemic, everybody was focused on what's going on with the pandemic rather than how do we make our process of getting cancer models more efficient, which, you know, then it takes attention away from what you have, which might be a good product and might be a good business model. But a lot of it comes down to timing.
So, and for our audience, if you can explain what bioinformatics scientist is and what is...
Sure. So bioinformatics is combination of biology and informatics. So because I had a background in computer science and I wanted to use my computer science for something useful, I thought I want to use computer science for life sciences. So by doing a bioinformatics education, I learned a lot about biology, molecular biology, chemistry, statistics that you use for research, and data science. And by combining all of these skills with the computer science skills that I had, that made me the bioinformatician that could look into DNA sequencing, data analysis, and all these kind of things. So bioinformatics is a very big field because you can use your data science skills to do lots of different things. But for me specifically, I was at the time focused on genome sequencing, analyzing genomics, both for cancer and rare diseases, and then eventually we focused on cancer with repositive.
There's so many things. If I go into this deeper, I may have a lot of questions, and we may end up spending all of our time in discussing bioinformatics only. But I'll keep this for another day, maybe a dedicated podcast to that. I because I come from a tech background, and I haven't got into a touch with this domain earlier, biology and drug discovery, and now because I'm part of this ecosystem.
Yeah.
I understand it's how big opportunity is in terms of the tech, and there's so many untapped domains where tech can contribute, and especially using machine learning models and AI, which makes the whole process very efficient now. So yeah, that's there. Coming back to your journey, till now you became CEO like 4 times, 4 different companies.
Yes.
And as a CEO, and that too running companies in different domains. You earlier worked on repositive, which is a completely different model. Then you worked in Otosh Technology as CEO. And you ran the technology company. And now you're working in another company which is focused more on genetics and biology, which is in there. So how's your experience overall, and according to you, what are the biggest challenges that you faced as a CEO?
So just to complete the timeline from before, when repositive didn't work out, I then was helping a number of different startups, and then I was hired to Outrage Technology, first as the COO, and then I got promoted to CEO. And that was where we were working together. And we were doing that up until recently, until April this year, when I then moved on to my latest adventure, I'd say, being the CEO of Neuralentech, a biotech spin-out from Austria.
And I must say that one of the best mentors that I've got in during my professional careers, and the foundation that you have set in the organization I'm trying to build on the top of that right now. Please carry on.
Okay, thank you. So that's just to finish the count. So I started with the charity that I founded. So I was the CEO of the charity, which had no budget, no money, but we did have a board of trustees around, and a lot of volunteers helping to run events. Then I was the CEO of Repositive that I founded and ran that company for 7 years. Then I was the CEO of Outrage Technology and ran it for 2 years about. And now I'm with Neuralentech as CEO. So what is the commonalities across those experiences? Well, overall I'd say that to become CEO, you really just need to be comfortable making decisions, right? Because if you say, okay, I'm the CEO, but you're not taking decisions, so things don't move forward. So the very key thing is you need to be comfortable making decisions. That's regardless of whether you have a budget or not, whether you have a team size of anything or not, but you need to be comfortable making decisions. And when you're in a startup environment, that goes for all of these experiences, things just need to happen fast. You can't just hang around and wait, let's see if we get some better data, or let's just see if it solves itself if we ignore it for long enough. This just doesn't work in a startup, because if it doesn't work today, then tomorrow it might have blown out of proportions and kill your company, right? So you always need to deal with things face on. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges for a company, and for people who start a company or who join a startup, this might also be the biggest challenge to learn if they're not comfortable being always in the zone of make things move forward fast, right? So that, I think that is one of the key learnings or key advice maybe also of how to run a business successfully. Just make sure you keep moving things forward remove the blockers.
Makes sense. And what is your perspective? Do you think that to run a company, it is more founder-led? Means it depends on how passionate the founder of the company is to make things happen, or is it more about the market? Or what do you think? What is the key ingredients of making us successful?
Of making it successful? Well, I think the thing about being founder-led often comes down to this drive of making things happen, right? Because if you hire someone in as CEO, if they don't have the drive to make things happen, things might just go slower. And that's not what you want as a startup, right? So that's why having the founder run the company, usually you always have the drive to make things happen. But if it's a founder who's not comfortable with pushing things, if it's or not comfortable making decisions, or feel very uncomfortable in the position of taking business decisions or commercial decisions, then probably the company would run faster if you get someone in who is comfortable in that position, right?
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily an answer for everything. Always keep a founder as the CEO. That's not always an answer, because if that person is not keeping things moving and moving fast, then it's probably not the right person in that role.
So you mean the founder should, or anyone who wants to work on something specific, they should focus on their own strengths, and where they think where their expertise or strength doesn't lies, they should bring someone else.
Yes, there is immense value in knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. Because if you know this is my strength, then you can do that, and then you can deliberately delegate the stuff that you're not good at, or not happy doing, or not comfortable doing, delegate it to other people. And this is where, if you're the founder of a company and you're not comfortable in that role, then delegate that bit to someone else, and then you move to something that you are comfortable with, right? This is a big strength, from personally speaking. Anyone who knows what they're good at, they have this opportunity to divide things in a way that everybody will be happy.
Yeah.
But if you don't yet know what your strengths and weaknesses are, you're sort of, fumbling in the dark, right?
And sometimes I think even people, when they are aware that this is something that their expertise is not in certain domains, still they like to keep it with them because they are founder. Have you seen this ever?
So I was very happy that was not the case with Neuralentech. That we have a very good working relationship, me and the founders who in the team, and the founder who used to be CEO before me. But I've seen in other companies that founders have had a feeling of, this is my baby, so I'm not going to give it away. Yeah. Right? And they may or may not have realized that they're not maybe the best person doing it, but they're uncomfortable giving responsibility away. Right? Just because it's mine, I want to hold on to it. Which is sort of from the outside it looks a bit, maybe it's the wrong word, but childish, or sort of, it's not seeing the bigger picture, right? So if you look at the bigger picture, you can see, is this helpful? Is it helpful for you? Is it helpful for the company? So if you have investors, for example, they will chime in with their opinion as well, if that's the case. Yeah. But if there's no investors, if it is just a one-person run company or a very small team, and they don't have investors who also have an interest in things running efficiently, you can probably stay in that situation for a long time, and it might run fine, or maybe it will stall the development of the company. But if you've already at the point where you've taken investment, then investors will also point out if they see, actually it looks like this is not going as we expect it to be, it's taking too long time, or it's going too slow. Is this really where your skills are? Is this really where you're comfortable? Because they will ask these questions in order to protect their investment, right? They're not interested in things going slower or stalling just because the person is not the right person to take decisions, or not feel comfortable in the role of CEO. Yeah,
makes sense. And coming to the execution part at a CEO role, what do you think, what is more difficult to deal with, processes or people?
Isn't it the same thing?
So it's like when you work with the management, or when you work with experienced people, people come with certain characteristics, certain mindsets.
Yeah.
And when you put people from different skills, which are very high skilled in their own domains, from different whatever that they are doing, but this is what I would say experienced when making sure that they work together collaboratively is in itself is one of the challenges.
Yes.
Or so that is one part, and joining a company where there is no such process at all, and everyone is trying to do everything what they can, is also a difficult part. So and when people are working in a certain way, it's very difficult for them to change.
Yes.
Sometimes people adapt things easily, but more often it is not the case. So what do you think, implementing the process and making sure people follows it, that is more difficult, or dealing with people?
So there are so just to be entirely honest, there are many ways of running a company. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there are many ways of running a company, because let's just say if you're working in a factory and every position in the factory have a very specific role, then your job of running it is to make sure everybody knows their specific role. Let's call it the process. Everybody knows their specific process, and if everybody knows, and if they train the next person who takes over that role, you don't have to do anything anymore. You sit back, relax. Not much for you to do. But in startups and in companies today, in a changing world, it's not a fixed process forever after, right? So it's very important that each individual understand their point and their contribution, their point in the value chain, let's say, and their contribution to the business. So that if something is not working as planned, they can take decisions to fix it, right? So you can't lock everything down in a process and this is a process forever, because next day the world is different and then that process doesn't work anymore. And the only way to solve that on a higher level is to give everybody the visibility of where we're going and what we need to be successful, and give them enough responsibility that they can, and authority that they can also sort out the problems themselves without having to go through a process of reporting, hey, something is not working, and it goes all the way up to the top before you say, okay, let's change the process down at this point, right? But if everybody knows this is what we're aiming to do, this bit is not working, hey, if these two people do this thing different, it's solved, we continue, right? Then it can be solved at the level of the individual people. So fixed processes only work in the places of the business where things are static for a longer time. But where there's fluctuations, things can change, or each situation might be different. The more visibility you can give the individual, and the more individual authority and individual responsibility you can give to those people to solve the problems on their level without having to go ask the manager or the manager's manager to solve it, that's better. So when you say processes versus people, I'm like, well, if you do it right, then the people will have enough authority to change the process where needed and then get on with things. So it's not for me as a manager necessarily to say this is a process for everything and then leave me alone. But it's more about how do you give the people that visibility, understanding of what we're doing,
and responsibility and accountability to do
and
that
accountability
as well. It should not be only a 1% driven. It's also like upwards. They should also take accountability. Yeah, makes sense. As a CEO of the company, or as a founder of a company, you also founded a company. How important is it to onboard right investors? Like, there may be investor who can invest high ticket in your business, but may not come up with the right mindset. And as you rightly mentioned, that when they invest in your company, they have their own voice. And you may or may not want, you need to listen to their opinions as well. So how important it is, and according to you, and what difference it makes? So because, and for good reasons, investors are interested in their investment to make it successful. And depending on the type of investor, they may be spending more or less time and be more or less involved
in talking to the management team about the strategy and direction of the business. So when you choose to bring an investor on board, it's worth keeping in mind that if this company is successful, I'll be working with this person and this company for many years. So if you have any issues working with that person, you probably shouldn't bring them on, because then you're basically signing up for those issues for the next many years, right? So there's a bit of, and this is on a people level, that you need to know that you can work with these people, right? And there will always be issues, but you know that you can talk to these people to figure it out and then find a common way forward. So when you bring on board investors, I'd like to recommend anyone to, where possible, bring value-add investors, so investors who knows a bit about your business or industry, so they can actually come with useful suggestions, and they might be able to make connections to potential customers, connections to other investors, connections to other businesses. But also, when you then are about to sign a deal with them, make sure you do a bit of background check. How are these guys to work with, right? If you talk to other companies in their portfolio and they say, oh, these people, they keep bothering us all the time, or then understand a bit what is it that they're bothering them, and would that bother you as well, right? Because if it's something that wouldn't bother you, you're probably fine. But if you hear something that would cause you concern as well, then maybe this is not someone you want to sign up to working with for the next many, many years.
True. So it's not only about money, it's also about the people that you're working with. And maybe that is more important, because you'll be working with them. Yeah. And you need to consider their opinions as well. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Also, you mentored quite a few startups during your journey. Yeah. Some of them were from academics. Yeah. I believe some of them were from very early stage startups. Yeah. So what do you think, what commonalities that you see in those startups? I believe that a lot of people get ideas. You know, it's the one who execute those ideas. Yes. And may take a risk on certain things. So according to you, what are the commonalities that you see in those startups, and specifically successful startups? Yeah. So first of all, I see, because of the programs where I'm mentoring, I see a lot of startups or startup ideas, and only some of them actually become startups or actually go on to the point where they're raising money and they're building a business and so on. The point where a lot of them just fail or don't continue is the point where they need to change from, I have this idea, I want it to work, to how do I make it work and how do I make it more likely to be successful every day, which is less about closing yourself into the basement and figuring it all out before you come up with a big solution, and more about going out there and talking to people and trying out your ideas and get feedback on your first prototype or whatever it is. And the companies or the ideas that originate from academia or from academics, those people tend to have this, because of the way that academia works, is that you, as a PhD, you are basically left to run your own project or do your own work, and then once in a while you then publish a paper and you show the results. But you can't do a startup like that. You can't just close yourself away and do the work and then once it's finished show it to the world. That doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Those that are successful are the ones that dare to put their idea out there. So if they're, for example, building a piece of software, they will make a prototype and start showing it to people and say, where would you click? Right? And then see, oh, people click there. I didn't expect that. Then before you even build it, you already figured out that you should make the design different, you should make the value proposition different. But you can only get this feedback by putting yourself out there, talking to people, getting feedback, iterating. And this is the biggest, I don't call it a gap or a leap in your perspective on how you look at your business idea, from an idea where you have to solve the whole puzzle on your own and then show it to the world, versus you have an idea, you show it, you get feedback, you improve it, you show it, you improve it, you get feedback, and continuing that iteration. That's what really characterizes the successful startups. Those who even make it from idea to a startup. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think feedback is one of the crucial things, as you rightly mentioned. And when you try to implement something, like everything in one go may take a lot of time, and when you put it out, you might have left the chance, on implementing something into the market. So even when we were working in technology, we also worked on a product and we implemented a lot of features in that. And sometimes I feel this is the case with other entrepreneurs also. Sometimes those startup founders gets emotionally attached with their ideas, product ideas. And do you feel that when you're working or when you generally trying to make a business, you should not be focused on the solution that you are providing, but the problem that you are trying to solve?
Yes.
And there is a high probability that you might end up pivoting that software or any product into different trajectory completely when you take the feedback.
Yes.
And so do you feel that this emotional attachment to the solution should not be there, rather than the entrepreneur should be focused on problems?
So let me just for an example, blockchain is very exciting at the moment. It's a new technology, it can do a lot of things. But if you start up a business idea with, we will use blockchain to solve this problem, and you then later find out that actually we don't need blockchain, we can do it simpler, faster, and easier to maintain if we implement this other thing and solve the problem, right? Then if you're too attached with, but I want to be a blockchain expert and that's going to be my identity from now on, so I'd rather stick with this idea and make it work with blockchain because I don't want to do this other thing, then you might be holding the startup back from being successful, because yes, maybe you're using a cool technology, but it's going to take you ages to maintain, and it costs you a fortune to hire developers who understand how to implement it. And if there is a simpler solution that would solve the same problem. I'm just making this up, but this is the kind of situation where you could have someone falling in love with the technical solution and not with the actual problem you're solving. Because if you see your customer in front of you and you say, okay, I'll implement the solution for you, and it's going to be half a year before it's finished because we're using something very technically difficult, versus, well, we can do it much faster with using a simpler solution. What would you go for from a business perspective? Well, obviously, the faster, simpler solution. But if you fall in love with your technology, you might be holding back your business.
Yeah. Makes sense. Going back to your journey where you stopped your job and started the charity business, how difficult it was for you? Like, even before joining O2H, I also ran my own company, although it was fairly smaller compared to what you are doing and what you have done. But I think it requires certain courage and risk-taking attitude to do so. And when you're already in that 9 to 5 job pattern, you're already there, and when you have certain things set up in certain way, where the money is coming, you might have already targeted how you're going to spend the money which is already fixed. Then how did you find that change in your career, and how challenging it was?
Yes, so it was a very specific moment on a very specific day that I decided I wanted to leave my job and start the charity. And it was the day when I realized that I'd been spending more time that day thinking about the problem I wanted to solve than the work I was supposed to do at work. So I thought to myself, you know what? Well, one, I'm not effective at work like this, but also I so much want to solve this problem and if nobody else is working on it, why couldn't it be me? And then from one day to the next, I gave my notice to my job, and then I didn't have a job, and I just started incorporating the charity, and started working on that without any pay. And a lot of people say, whoa, right, you really that's a risky move, you're brave and so on. But in my mind at the time, I was like, well, if it doesn't work, I'll go get a job again. Right? I mean, I have some skills, bioinformatics and computer science. I know I can get some job somewhere. These are, generally speaking, skills that are in demand, so I wasn't so worried about that. And so the prospect of maybe you work on it and it's not working and then you have to go find a job, that didn't seem like a big risk to me. And the interesting thing maybe is that I was not in a very privileged position. Like I didn't have like a big savings or so on. So when I left my job from one day to the next, I actually didn't know, after a month or two, I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent. Yeah, because I didn't have big savings. But as soon as I left my job, I realized that there was a lot of part-time things I could do to earn a bit of money on the side so I could do the work on the charity full-time. So eventually I got a part-time job where I could review papers about sequencing technology and get paid for doing that. So I did that in the evenings and the weekend and still worked full-time on setting up my charity. Right? And I didn't have this plan laid out by the time I quit my job, but by the time I quit my job, I had this space of mind to figure out how to make it work, right?
So it's just that drive that when you focus on something, you'll figure out a way to reach there.
Yes,
but at
exactly.
least you should have certain clear idea where you want to go and why do you want to go.
Yes.
There's also an interesting story behind why you really started DNA Digest. If you would like to share that.
So which part of the story are you interested in?
When your mom were diagnosed with some...
Okay. Yeah, so my, how to say, this is part of me finding my,
It's only if you're comfortable.
No, I'm comfortable. It's just I didn't know whether you wanted to include this in your podcast. You can cut this bit out. So the point when I realized that I really want to make an impact with the work that I'm doing, and what I described as the difference between this tiny bit of PhD research and what's happening in the real life, that was as a revelation moment for me when my mother got diagnosed with cancer. She was back in Denmark, and I realized, well, what I'm doing in my PhD research is genetics, and it's understanding how the cell works, and in principle this should somehow also contribute to cancer research, because cancer is a genetic disease. But I couldn't see the connection between what I was doing and what would actually make a difference for someone who today was getting treatment for cancer, like my mom was getting treatment back in Denmark. So it helped me understand, like, actually, I'm not happy doing something that's that far removed from the real impact. I'd rather move closer to something that is connected to the patients, or is connected to what is the impact on the day-to-day. And this is what, for me, feels as a stronger impact. Because you can argue there's lots of value in research generally, but for me, what drives me is to be able to see the connection between what I'm doing today and what is making a difference to a patient tomorrow. And because my mother got diagnosed at that time, that was really the wake-up moment for me. And when I decided, okay, I'm going to move to something that's closer, so I went from my PhD work to working at Illumina, because at Illumina I could collaborate with their clinical partners and show them how to use sequencing to do faster diagnostics for both cancer and genetic diseases. So I felt that was already closer to clinical work and something that would have an impact for patients. And it was only when I realized that actually all the work that we're doing is hindered by the same bottleneck, the access to data, that was when I then thought, I can make a bigger impact if I solve this problem for everybody instead of trying to solve it just for me and my project. So by then leaving Illumina and starting the charity to work on the data access problem would be a bigger impact for everybody. So I'm happy to say that my mom came well out on the other side of her cancer treatment. It was a huge ordeal. Cancer treatment and chemotherapy is very hard on the body, and it took a long time to recover from that, but she recovered, and I'm very happy that she's still around. So yeah,
it was really inspiring for me personally when I heard that story. So I just wanted to share it with our audience. And the point is that when you are really driven with some specific idea, when you're clear why you want to do it, then you will figure out your how you will do it. So it was really personally very inspiring for me. So thank you for sharing that story with us. You mentored a lot of people, a lot of startups, a lot of people, including me. who were your mentors, or did you find any, or did you figure it out on your own?
So maybe one of my personality traits is that I'm not afraid to ask questions. So it's also easy for me to connect with people and not afraid to start conversations to get feedback on what I'm doing. So as soon as I started Repositive, for example, and we got on board a number of angel investors, I would reach out to them and say, oh, could you please take some time to talk with me about this thing that I'm working on, to help me understand better or learn from your experience how we can do this. And I did this very often with many of the angel investors, which meant that they all became somehow mentors or advisors just because I reached out to them frequently. Some of those that I've gotten the most feedback from or have been most impactful in my entrepreneurial journey, I would mention for one Jonathan Milner, for example, because he was one of the very first angels who believed in our idea and wanted to help us get it off the ground. And he spent very generously a lot of his time just giving feedback on the ideas and the business model. So speaking like that, a lot of our angel investors through that journey actually qualify as advisors or mentors in some respect.
All right, great. I think there are a lot of people, out there to help. You just need to go and ask, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, that's it from my side for this podcast. We'll surely have a lot of things to talk about, and we can have a lot of series of podcasts on things and experience that you have, then would like to take a glimpse of it and share with our audience so that they can also learn. But given the interest of time and your packed schedule, I would not stretch it a bit more. But as an ending notes or comments, what would you suggest these early stage startup founders or entrepreneurs as a takeaway to keep things in mind while they want to start something new, or they already started, or struggling with something or whatever it is? So what is your advice, so to say, to all those startup founders?
Get your idea out there, make it all plans break when they hit reality. That's so you just need to get it out there and test it in real, right? And depending on your type of company, whether that means testing with users or it means just interviewing your potential customers about what their problems are, the sooner you get out there, the sooner you get the feedback that will help you. And if your particular challenge is on, let's say, some of the topics of investment or fundraising or so on, go talk to some investors, ask them about what that works like, right? So you can, all your ideas, you can improve them by talking to people who've been there before, or if it's about your idea of how to help a customer, talk to customers, find out what their problems are, and then you'll be able to help them much better. Get out there. Yeah,
start something.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Fiona, again for joining us today and being part of this podcast. I really enjoyed, and I'm sure people will have a lot of learnings from this podcast as well. So thank you so much again, and we wish you best of luck for your next journey.
Thank you, Akshay.